Hi, this is Russ Ballard, and you're listening to the Voices of Russ Ballard podcast.
Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Voices of Russ Ballard with myself, Ian.
And me, Sven. Good morning, folks.
Good morning. Sven, looking very wintry in very cold Deutschland, I would imagine. You're looking as though you've got your ski wear there, or just your winter wear nicely. You're modeling very, very nicely the winter gear today.
Well, yeah, we could just add a beat now. It's fucking freezing cold here. It's just 4 degrees. But, Ian, there's something to warm us up. And, well, of course, it is our today's special guest. But I heard rumors that there are brilliant news around the Voices of Russ Ballard podcast. What's the news, Ian?
We have some great news. Well, sparing your blushes, Sven, thanks to you finding our friends at Spotify, or rather specifically the Anchor company at Spotify. It's enabled us for this being the 10th podcast, it's enabled us to go multi-platform. And
can you say this again? It is number
10.
10
indeed. And I'm really excited. The fact that we always wanted to let people know about Russ's website and obviously drive them to perhaps go and have a look on the website and all the great things that you put on there. But now we have a chance of reaching out to the people that perhaps don't know Russ quite so well, and they'll be very welcome as well. And if they're listening to this, you're very welcome. We have a Facebook group called The Voices of Russ Ballard, where lots of like-minded people discuss all sorts of nerdy stuff as well as general stuff about Russ and his career. I think the first piece of good news is that we're going multi-platform, and I'm going to ask Sven in a moment to list all those in case you want to subscribe to one of those platforms, or maybe you want to listen in a different format, and you'd be very welcome to do so. But while he's doing that, before we do that, the other piece of good news is that, and again linked to what Sven found in the Spotify world, is that we can play music. And we can't just play 2 or 3 albums like we've been able to before. We can now play music. We can play anything in the Spotify library. And it means that when we talk to our special guest today very soon, that we can play songs from throughout, linked songs throughout his career or her career, if we have some lady guests on soon. So it really does widen the opportunity for us to make it more entertaining for you, the listeners, and we're very, very excited about it. So, Sven, tell us how could somebody listen, apart from the website link? How could somebody listen on the Voices of Russ Ballard podcast? Tell me.
Well, you can, as usual, go to russballardmusic.com to listen to the podcasts, and which is really handy, I think, to all of us. You can use your mobile phone or your Google Homes or Alexas in the world. You can find us now on Anchor, which is by Spotify. You can listen on Spotify. You can listen on Apple Podcasts. We are on Google Podcasts, on Radio Public, on Pocket Casts, and on Breaker, which is Brill News. But so, Ian, without any further ado, let's jump into podcast number 10. Again, I can't say it often enough. I mean, it's anniversary.
We're into double figures. We're into double figures, Sven. Double figures.
That's brilliant. So, Ian, who is our today's special guest?
Well, I think without any further ado, we have to introduce him because he's champing at the bit, and we want to hear him. And so, good morning, everybody. We hope it's a sunny afternoon with you wherever you are. It's been a long time waiting for this man to come on the show. In fact, it's been all day and all of the night. And some might say it's a tragedy. But listen, we're not going to bang on about it anymore, because what do you want if you don't want Mr. Bob Henrit, ladies and gentlemen?
Round of applause.
Oh, that's very good. I'm stunned. Very good. I should have written it down, really. But that's very kind of you to say all of those things. You did say something nice there, didn't you?
Lots of nice things, yeah. By association, Bob. Associate those wonderful songs, yeah.
Well,
only nice things.
Funnily enough, I was writing about some of those songs because we did. We went to Wormwood Scrubs to entertain the inmates, and they were
as you do,
as we did, yeah. So we went and we did a gig, and there were all these. Vassal was in the audience, as in Vassal was Spy, and various other people, and we entertained them with songs like "What Do You Want If You Don't Want Money" and "Poor Me" and all those Adam Faith songs, and nobody saw the irony. I certainly didn't see the irony, but I think Vassal probably did. And there was a guy who murdered his wife in Germany. He was a soldier. And he murdered his wife and made it look like suicide. And he was in the audience. How strange. Anyway, but I digress.
Well, that's a very quick one from me on that. I actually, as an ex-banker, we went and played in the played football, the high security prison in the Isle of Wight in Parkhurst. Yeah, and it was quite an interesting experience, one for another day. But things like when the ball went off at the side, and when I collected the ball, somebody would pull a balaclava down, because they all had balaclavas and donkey jackets, and pull the balaclava down and say, "Do you recognise me at your bank?" and things like that, and various other things. Our goalkeeper was very well employed, and someone said to him, "Tell you what, mate, you're having a great game. If you ever do bird, you'll be in the first team," which was, quite reassuring, really, for the guy.
For the goalkeeper.
Anyway, we're going to start at the beginning. Sven, do you want to kick off our questions for the wonderful Bob Henrit here on the Voices of Russ Ballard?
Oh yeah, yes please. I do have a great idea. I think all of you will like it. I'm going to ask similar questions we asked Maud and Thorpe and Russell, and then we see with Bob's answers who told us the truth. That is always very funny. So what about the early days? Let's start with the early days to give this podcast kind of a structure. I hope so. Bob, please tell us a little bit about your birthplace and growing up in Hertfordshire.
Yeah, Russell and I are pretty much interchangeable with this. We grew up we weren't exactly neighbours, but we grew up in the same little town in Hertfordshire, which was just out of the smoke. London was called the smoke in those days, and we were just out of the smoke. So we grew up out of the mess. And we went to our own school, our different schools. I went to a Catholic college, which with everything that entails, anybody who's listening who knows anything about Catholic colleges will know exactly how painful it is. And so I went to one, Clem Catini went to the same one. So it wasn't a music school by any manner of means, but it just happened to throw up a few ultimately famous musicians. And anyway, so this was the very borders of London, and we could get into London if we wanted to very quickly, except that we weren't really allowed to go. It was, Sin City, and at 13 or 14 years old, when we first got into music, we wanted to go and see instruments. It didn't matter what they were. So we would get on the trolley bus, Russell and I, and Bernie Benson, and we would go to Edmonton, and we would look in a music shop called Berry's. And we go there because it had a microphone in the window and a single dodgy snare drum on a stand. And that was the extent of its musical instruments. But it didn't stop us going there. So this was part of our Saturdays. And eventually we either we got old enough to go to the West End of London to see proper instruments, or we just went, you know, sort of disobeying our parents, which of course my kids would never have got in, never been allowed to have done. So it was the leafy suburbs, we called it. And my next door neighbour was one Cliff Richard, except he wasn't Cliff Richard, he was Harry Webb.
Got myself a crying, talking, sleeping, walking, living doll. Got to do my best to please her just 'cause she's a living doll. Got a roving eye, and that is why she satisfies my soul. Got the one and only walking, talking, living doll. We'll take a look at her head.
And Harry came from India when partition began, and lived next door to us with his uncles and aunts, and we knocked about together, and so that the whole family lived next door to us, including the original family that were there, and we would go to Saturday morning pictures together to see Tom Mix and Wobble-on Cassidy and all those cowboys, and we'd see very average films about space, and so that was how it all began. And we joined something called Cheshunt Boys Club. Now, Sir Cliff, as he became, went to school with my sister, and they were in the same class. And we would go to Cheshunt Boys Club, of which he ultimately became, I think he became the president, but we'd go there to rehearse and play five-a-side football, all of that sort of thing. And it was a proper boys club at a time when that was okay. Nowadays, of course, it would be looked at rather strangely, or as indeed a youth club would be. But then that was what we did. So there were probably half a dozen bands that were involved with this Cheshunt Boys Club. And I think we played one and sixpence a year to be members, which meant we could rehearse in perpetuity for 1 and 6 a year, which was a good bargain. So we all became part of the boys club, and eventually it was decided that there would be a charity gig, and Cliff by this time was Cliff and the Drifters, and he was going to top the bill at a theatre in Edmonton, and we were going to be on it. Now by this time, Russell and I and Russell's brother and Bernie Benson were in a band. We were called the Daybreakers. Were we the Daybreakers? Yeah, we probably were the Daybreakers by then, with a guy called Buster Meikle. And Buster was ultimately in Unit 4+2, but we'll save him for later. So we were doing this gig, and we're in the dressing room, which turns out to be a classroom. And Hank's guitar, his fabulous guitar, which turned out later on not to be so fabulous at all. But they were known as Martian cricket bats in the 50s, and they had they really were planks of wood. And he had an Antoria plank, which was nothing like a Fender, was nothing like a Futurama. But anyway, so one of my pals was with us, and he strummed Hank's guitar, which was in a cardboard case on one of the desks. And Hank said, "Leave it alone, son. Costs a lot of money." And this was the guy who, interestingly enough, made Russell's holy guitar. This was Jim Wilkinson. So not only did he make Russell's Holy Guitar and cut the bouts, which are anybody who has no idea what I'm talking about, who is me, but anyway, it's the sort of the cutouts, the bits where your hands go when you're rushing up and down the frets. He made them equal, and nobody had done that before. And then he also did, believe it or don't, when Argent's album, the first album came out, he invented this rather runic script which said Argent. And so Jim invented that, and he was a very clever guy. And every now and again we'd say something stupid to him, and he'd get on with it, which was rather weird. So that was Jim. So we grew up.
That was the neon. So sorry, Bob. So just to clarify, that was, I think, then that was what we call the neon sign that was on the first Argent album. That sort of logo. Is that what you're referring to there? Brilliant. Yeah. Okay.
I always thought of it as looking like space sort of letters, sort of thing you'd expect to see on a spaceship. Anyway, so Jim invented that, and by this time we're getting pretty good, and we're playing with lots of people. And how it worked in those days, we're talking about just getting into the 60s, and how it worked in those days is that we would get a gig and as the Daybreakers, and we do our act, and then one of Larry Parnes's stable would come on and sing his hit record, and we would back them. Or it could be Helen Shapiro, it could have been anybody from the time. So we got to back a lot of people, and we got to learn a lot of songs. So by this time, we're getting very well known, and we're sort of, it's a bit interchangeable. We're playing with, sometimes we're playing with Mike Berry, Russell and I, sometimes with Chaz Hodges, and sometimes we're playing with anybody else who needed our services. And one of the bands that we played in, even though we weren't in it, was called the Blue Jacks. And a guy who ultimately became our road manager for just about every band I was in, including Argent, he had better gigs than we had, or he had more gigs. And every now and again, if we didn't have a gig, he would call us and say, "Do you want to do a gig in an American bass on Friday?" So we'd turn up at 15 years old, me and Nobby Dalton, who ultimately was in the Kinks playing bass. We turned up at some sort of RAF or a USAF camp, and one of them we were playing at had the guys from the Crickets in the audience who had been seconded to being in the army, or the Air Force as it was then for them. So we did a lot of this, and eventually my brother-in-law was playing with a band called the Hunters, and the Hunters were an instrumental band who were exceedingly good. In those days, everything seemed to be modeled on the Shadows, except that at the beginning they weren't the Shadows. Of course, they were the Drifters. And so in the beginning, they were doing rather well, and so were the Hunters. And the Hunters called me when I was still at school, and they said, "Do you want to come and play on a record with us?" And so I found my way to Fontana Records in Marble Arch. I don't know how I did it, because I couldn't possibly have driven. I think I was 15. So anyway, I found my way to Fontana Records. And as I was going in with my bass drum under my arm, the guy who was producing us, a chap called Jack Baverstock, said, "Oh, you won't be needing that, son." And I said, "Won't be needing what?" And he said, that bass drum. We don't record bass drums here. We don't need it. As a matter of fact, we don't successfully record them at all. So I said, "But it's part of what I play. It's called rocker shake." And he said, "What is rocker shake?" And I showed him what rocker shake was. Boom, cha, boom, boom, cha, boom, boom, cha, cha, boom, 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 that sort of thing. And he said, "Oh," I said, "and if we don't have that, this song's not going to be the same." So I was the first person to be able to play, or to be allowed to play, a bass drum at Fontana Records.
That's a brilliant story. But was it always clear for you that you wanted to be a drummer instead of being
yes, I've
a bass player?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Well, what happened is that I went round to Bernie Benson, who is very much part of me and Russell's growing up. Bernie played bass with us, and he had something behind his back. And he said, oh, we're having a skiffle group. And he produced what was behind his back, which was a washboard. And he said, and you're the washboard player. And it was his mother's washboard, which Mod has got somewhere, I'm told. So I began as a washboard player, and the only logical conclusion or the logical direction from playing a very loud washboard was to become a drummer. So I did. And I borrowed a drum kit from somebody I was in the Scouts, and somebody, I think one of the other patrol leaders had a drum kit, and he loaned it to me, but unfortunately he wanted it back. And it turned out years later that I discovered it was hugely valuable, this particular drum kit. And unfortunately, I didn't have it anymore, and I don't suppose he did either. So that was the very beginning. That was skiffle. Yeah. So we play locally in youth clubs and the boys' club for probably something like 5 shillings, which was, here's the jokes, which was all we could afford at the time. So, if anybody hasn't got that, I'm sorry, I could say it again, but anyway, so we would play everywhere we could for 5 shillings, which was all we could afford at the time. So we got on with the quest for stardom, and we would rehearse diligently. I'd forgotten about this. We would rehearse diligently. I think it was every Wednesday at the boys' club, and then we would play five-a-side football, and then we would walk home. And this went on, and it was a wonderful time for us because there was so much music going on. And interestingly, the music we were listening to wasn't rock and roll. Well, it was. If we were lucky, we could listen to rock and roll on Radio Luxembourg. But as far as the BBC were concerned, they didn't have what we wanted to listen to. They didn't have rock and roll. They had novelty music, and they'd have Billy Cotton Band Show. I don't know if you remember this, Streety, but certainly Billy Cotton Band Show. Mm-hmm. That was the extent of music in those days, and they would have novelty songs, as I said, like I Discovered a Boom 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 right before my eyes, and it was just a variety show, which was just as well in the end, because by the time I joined Adam Faith, who was very much into variety, I knew all about the medium of variety, and we began, me and Russell and Thorpe and Mod began to be knee deep in it, and it was very much part of our lives.
Well, Bob, we were gonna go on to it seems like we're almost at the Adam Faith juncture.
Yeah, we are. Yeah.
But before we do that, I just to backtrack, because I think some people listening to this might, when you mentioned that you live next door to Harry, i.e. Cliff, might want me to say, the two of you were bachelor boys back in the day then. But I just wondered, sorry, the joke still comes.
He might not.
But you, have you kept in touch with him over the years as you both, I'll say became famous. It sounds a bit glib to say that, but you both gained, notoriety in the music industry. Did you keep in touch with him as time went on, as schoolboy chums, as it were?
Well, I mean, he went off to be a superstar, and I went off to be, I was really pleased with the direction I was in, but Cliff was up there. I mean, every time you switched on the TV on a Saturday, Cliff was on the TV. So we didn't keep up as such, although there was once that I was supposed to play with him. What happened is they would play, the Cliff and the Shadows were playing at the Finsbury Park Astoria, and Tony Meehan had, I think maybe he had his tonsils out or something, so he couldn't play. And they were thinking about using me. I was still a kid, and they were thinking about using me, and this was the sort of thing that my mother and Cliff's mother were talking about over the garden fence. And it transpired that they hadn't used me for this week in Variety because they thought I was at school and too young. So I never did get to play with Sir Cliff. But hey, I can wait.
Yeah. I mean, so you don't talk anymore, you could say.
It's so funny
That's enough of this. I think
we.
I'm sorry.
Ian.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't know. It just came to me in a flash. So sorry,
yeah.
Bob. So we were moving on to Adam Faith. So I think that we really want to hear about the Adam Faith and the Roulettes side. And I think in line with Sven's initial question that we asked Russell and the boys, I'm just going to sort of factor these in, or perhaps you can factor these into your answer, which was general questions about Adam, such as what was he like? You know, what was your favorite Adam Faith song? What was your least favorite? And lastly, also, did Adam ever tell you off for any reason or have any disagreements? That might come out in your next response, but we'd love to hear.
As it happens, it is in the book. Through my time with Adam, Tell to us, he was never Adam to us. He was always Tell.
I think I'm just gonna say one thing there for our listeners. Bob just said it's in the book. The book that Bob is referring to is called Banging On. It's available in all good bookshops. So get on to Amazon, get on to wherever you can and buy it because it's a great read. And meanwhile, after the advert, back to Bob Henrit.
Silly ass. Yeah, it was. I wanted stardom, and I was working really hard. I would get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to do my paper round, and then having done my paper round, I would get the trolley bus to school. And because I'd been rehearsing the night before, not only would I have newsprint all over my fingers, I would have unfinished English homework, which I always used to write on the bus. So I'd be sitting on the trolley bus writing my English homework, which didn't fool anybody, especially not the Jesuits. They won't get fooled again, if you'll pardon the pun. And it was a baptism of fire, and there was a certain cachet about being the most punished person at St. Ignatius, which was the school. And Clem claims it was him, but I think it was me. And it was the sort of things like doing my homework on the bus. But I wanted to be in music. I hadn't thought of anything else. Oh, actually, it's not quite true. There were two options, and they were absolutely diametrically opposed. One of them was to be a musician, and the other was to join the army on a short service commission. Now, at our school, we had something called CCF, which was the Combined Cadet Force. So we were all young soldiers.
Stand up and fight! You're in the army now. Oh, you're in the army now.
And I thought I quite like this, and we'd go camping in the army camps and enjoy ourselves and do all the exciting things. And I thought I could do this. Of course, it never entered my mind that by being a soldier I could get killed, and people did. So anyway, in the end, I decided against that and took what I considered to be the safer route, which was becoming a musician. So Adam was sort of, in a way, responsible for that, and it's a convoluted way. But John Rogers, who was my brother-in-law to be, who was in the he was in the Roulettes before me. He was in the Roulettes with Thorpe, so he was before Russell and he before Mod, and he rode me in to the Roulettes. And the next thing I know, I have left the sixth form. I'm not going to university anymore. I'm not doing any of those things. I'm a drummer. So I got into their van for the first time in my life, and we drove to Bristol, and we had a week in Variety at Bristol Hippodrome, probably. And we arrived, and I set up my drums and awaiting the great man who walked onto the stage and walked towards me and shook my hands. And the next thing I know, we're topping and tailing Adam Faith songs. So we're doing What Do You Want, obviously. We're doing Poor Me. We're doing When Johnny Comes Marching Home, which we always ended with. we're doing the skiffle medley, we're doing the rock and roll medley, and this was his act, this was his show, and this was what everybody would go to see him for. So this was the beginning of my career, and everybody who joined, including Russell, including Thorpe, including Mod, was on 2 weeks probation, and after every night you played, the others would go into the dressing room with Adam and talk about you, and it was quite nerve-wracking. You know, am I going to make it through the cut today? So I did make it, and eventually I am a roulette, and I had, fortunately, the suit fitted me, because you had suits in those days and ties, and you know, this was proper. Even the Beatles had suits. Obviously, we know had suits and ties. And the only people who didn't, or who didn't do it like we did, were the Rolling Stones. But everybody else had a suit made from a shiny material called tonic, which looked really good under lights, and which is why we wore it. So the next thing I know, the first 10 weeks of my professional career are doing weeks in Variety. Now, around the country. The first one was Bristol. We went up to Liverpool, where the Beatles were in the audience, believe it or not. And so this was probably my 5th or 6th week in showbiz, and we really were in showbiz. This was entertainment. It wasn't. Of course, it was rock and roll because that's what we were playing. But on the bill, the Variety bill, there would be people on trick. There'd be trick cyclists, you know, guys on one-wheeled cycles. And there was one particular act where this guy blew darts at his wife, who was a few feet away in front of a dartboard. So he blew them from his mouth and missed. Had to miss. It was a bit like the knife throwing act. And so that was one. And we had this chap called Don Errol. Anyway, this guy was a trumpet player. And part of our job was to heckle him. So we'd be secreted in the audience, me, Maud, Russell, Thorpe, and every now and again we had to shout out something to which he would respond. And eventually he would, and he was a wonderful trumpet player, but in those days, you wouldn't make so much money being a wonderful trumpet player in Joe Loss's band, but if you were an act on your own, you would. So we would be part of this show. And once we started going to doing pantomimes and summer seasons, we were even more part of it. You know, we had things to do, whether we liked it or not, and we did like it. We didn't know any better. We thought, oh, everybody does this, and we used to play tricks on one another. You can imagine what Mod was like, being in one place for 13 weeks doing the same stuff. You know. So anyway, you asked me about Adams and the songs. My favorite song, I don't believe we ever played together, and that was Made You.
Well, I saw you sitting there so cool, like you just come out from school, looking such a pretty sight, like a stick of dynamite, sitting on a coffee bar stool. Well, I guess that's a fact, and I never can relax until I've made you. Well, I feel such a crazy clown. You're the biggest thing in our town. Come on, honey, it ain't fair, never getting anywhere. How do I melt you down? Well, you're a gasser, that's a fact, and I never can relax until I've made you. Every time I make a play, baby, you just run away. I never made first base. Well, I guess that's a fact, and I never can relax until I've made you.
And Made You was a real, it was a real rocky song. It was a little bit, I mean, when you consider that what came after What Do You Want was Lonely Pup in a Christmas Shop, which seemed to me, even at that time, I'm sorry everybody, but it seemed ridiculous. And it's just, and that said, it was number one, so what the bloody hell do I know? So we...
not so lonely pup then.
You know, no. So anyway, we were going around the country, and the next thing we know, we're going around the world. And I had never been out of the country. And well, the next thing I know, I'm getting a passport to go to New Zealand. Now, New Zealand is a long way away, and then it was even further. So we were doing a tour of New Zealand with a guy called John Layton, if you remember him. Johnny, remember me? And so we were backing him, we were backing Adam. And it was pretty much a variety bill going around the theatres of New Zealand. So at 17 years old, there I am in New Zealand. And this was just before Russell joined. So he probably couldn't have gone because he's a year younger than me. He probably would have been too young to go. So we found ourselves down under. And this was at the time of the Bay of Pigs problem, which was when what was going on? It was all to do with rockets and fighting. Was it the Cold War? Anyway, we found our way to down to the very bottom of New Zealand, and we were thinking, well, if this is all going to go wrong and they're going to start bombing Cuba, or Cuba's going to start bombing America, this is probably the best place to be. We're far enough away from the action. So that was my first time on a plane, and I'll give you a bit of build this thing up. I was sitting reading my books. I read 9 books on the way to New Zealand and back, and I was a pretty avid reader in those days. And the guy came out of the cockpit. I think we were on a 707. No, I know we were on a 707. Guy came out of the cockpit with a stool, which he put in the middle of the cabin, stood on with a sextant in his hand, and pulled back the roof to look at the stars. And it suddenly dawned on me. It didn't dawn on me then because I didn't know enough about it, but years later, it dawned on me this is the only way we could know where the hell we were. Because, you know, we were flying across all these oceans, and it wasn't like they had GPS or any of that sort of thing. They didn't have anything. They just had this guy looking at the stars with his sextant. So anyway, we did manage it. Went to Australia first, then found our way down to New Zealand, and then we came back through Hong Kong. So all of a sudden, from never having been anywhere, well, I've been to all these very, very different places. And then the whole thing took off, and we started playing. I don't know if you know what ENSA is, but ENSA was how the troops of Britain were entertained, and so they would get people like Adam Faith, and they would get us to go and play in German camps, or rather in camps in Germany. Better get that right. And we
yes, probably should. Actually, Mr. Henrit, we're going to take a brief break there. Sorry, it's mid-story, but we want to hear the end of this, of course. And we'll be back with you in 1 second on the Voices of Russ Ballard.
What do you want if you don't want money? What do you want if you don't want gold? Say what you want and I'll give it you, darling. Wish you wanted my love, baby. What do you want if you don't want Herman? What do you want if you don't want pearls? Say what you want and I'll give it you, darling. Wish you wanted my love, baby. Well, I'm offering you this heart of mine, but all you do is play it through. What do you want, oh boy, you're making a fool of me. One of these days when you need my kissing, one of these days when you want me to, don't turn around 'cause I'll be missing the thing you want, my love, baby. Well, I'm offering you a diamond ring, but all you do is turn me down. What do you want, oh boy, you're going to down on me. One of these days when you need my kissing, one of these days when you want me to, don't turn around 'cause I'll be missing then you want to, my love, baby. Oh well, then you want to, my love, baby.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Voices of Russ Ballard with, on this occasion, the voice of Mr. Bob Henrit, or Robert Henrit. Bob, it's great to have you along, and we very rudely interrupted you when you were telling us about flying over to New Zealand.
Yes, we spent a lot of our time on aeroplanes, I have to say, and it was okay for me because I liked them, but Ray and Dave, which is of course another part of the story, were not great flyers, which was, if you're in the Kinks, it's a bit of a it's a sine qua non. You have to get on a plane most days and go somewhere, but they weren't good flyers. But I loved it. I thought it was just exciting. Although that said, there were a few near moments. The more planes you go on, the more problems you could have with them, you know, and so we certainly did. Anyway, we got up as far as entertaining the troops, and we would find our way to, for example, to Singapore or Kuala Lumpur or Germany a lot we went to. And we were in Germany, and believe it or not, the guy who was in charge of us, who was a major and didn't know how to deal with us long-haired yobs, he really didn't, and he couldn't salute us because we weren't in uniform, so he didn't know how to do that. So there's a sort of there's some phrases they use, everything all right, and then food all right? How are they looking after you? And we had this guy, so he made the mistake of saying, what would you like to do? You've got a day off today, and what would you like to do? So from nowhere or from somewhere, somebody said, let's drive a tank. Now, most of us, me and Russell didn't have, we certainly didn't have driving licenses and didn't know one end of a tank from the other. Well, we probably would have done if we'd been facing it. So we are driving tanks. And the guy told us that one of the soldiers who was also looking after us said, now listen, be careful with the clutch because it costs 35,000 quid if you break it. You know, if you burn out the clutch. So guess what we did? We burnt out the clutch. So
No.
Never had the, fortunately, but no doubt the bill is, they'll find us one day. So that was very much what we did. And we found our way to Kuala Lumpur. And then from Kuala Lumpur, we went to Singapore, and we were staying in a hotel. And there was this chap with a bald head, very athletic looking chap, swimming up and down the pool. And this chap was English, and he had a cabana, or whatever they call them, a bungalow alongside the pool where he lived. And it turned out that it was Noel Coward. So all of a sudden we're hobnobbing with Noel Coward. And he said, you must come to my place for tiffin. Actually, I don't do the voice as well as Russell does. But anyway, we went to his place for tiffin, sat on his floor while he regaled us with stories of himself, which was great. That's what we wanted. Whereupon we were all jet lagged and fell asleep on the floor, which he held against us forever. And in his book, well, I can't really paraphrase it, but he didn't like us falling asleep on the floor. And I was in Switzerland for Zildjian, actually, and this guy took me to lunch, who happened to be the great man's biographer. And he said, was that you? I said, that was us. He said, he hated you. He really hated the Roulettes.
Oh, no.
We were pallid. We were horrendously loud, horrifically something or other. And he said horrendously loud was how he finished it. We always had a problem with loud because we were playing what was really polite music. You know, we weren't playing it. This was not rock and roll. This was it was bordering on rock and roll, but it had to be played properly, and it couldn't be too loud, not in the situation that we were playing in, which was variety. So as the drummer, I was always deemed to be too loud, and I can't tell. We had a manager called Evie Taylor who looked after Adam. It was her fault that his second record was Lonely Pup in a Christmas Shop. Anyway, we had this. I'm not sure I should tell the story, but we were.
You can't say that. You've definitely got to tell us now.
Okay, I'll get round to it eventually. But she would, after the show, she would tell Adam aside and say something. There were other words in here, but she would growl, "The drummers too," something loud. And of course, what we were striving for was rock and roll, where the drummer is frequently too loud, in my defense. And so she hated that. And we had, you mentioned, did we have ever have any hard times or a row with Adam? And we didn't really, but we did with Evie Taylor. And she wanted us to be something that we weren't. You know, we wanted to be, I mean, there was a real dichotomy, because the whole thing was happening up in Liverpool. And we, of course, were several years before the Beatles, as far as being on the road and doing the sort of music we were doing. And so that's where we had arrived at. And so it had to be, it was Mersey beat. I mean, as you can tell from listening to the records, we were moving into a rock and roll direction. And she didn't understand it and didn't like it. But Tell did, Adam Faith did. So that was very much a baptism of fire.
If you should walk right out of the door, beats fast each time you're near. Bye bye time, bye bye time. I feel so good that you are here. Bye bye time, bye bye time. You're good to me, so good. While we have a bad time without you. If you should say goodbye to me, bye bye time, bye bye time, bye time, it sure would be bye bye time, bye bye time. My love for you, real love, it's true. I'll have a bye time without you. If you should walk right out of the door, bye bye time, bye bye time. I never come back anymore. Bye bye time, bye bye time. I tried, I know, I died, I know I'd have a bye bye time without you. Whoa, 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 I'd have a bad time without you.
Oh, and then we started doing pantomimes. Can you imagine? In those days, I don't know if you know this, but if a theatre doesn't have a pantomime, it doesn't have a good year, as in it won't make much money. So these guys, the pantomime was essential. And of course, for the last for the last year, nobody's had a pantomime. So everybody in theatre land is broke because they're not making that money. So, but we were in 1962. There was no, nobody knew about pandemics or anything, and we just got on with being emperor's guards and Chinese policemen in Aladdin and His Wonderful Lamp. And Tell was Aladdin, and I was absolutely hilarious. And I had to play in these shoes, which were somebody's idea of what people wore in China. So they had pointy toes that stuck up. They were yellow boots with like sort of Wellingtons, short Wellingtons, with toes that stuck up, which of course made it impossible to play the drums because they would get the shoes would get caught up with the pedals. So that was our introduction to pantomime. It was my only, I think, the only time we ever did pantomime. But we did do summer seasons, and the summer seasons were pretty much the same without the boots with the toes sticking up. So that was great fun, and we just put a bunch of guys who want to be rock and rollers in a summer season and see what happens, and we just had fun.
You finally changed your boots then, and you made your way to rock and roll. I found out something very interesting. There is an unreleased drum album you recorded with Bobby Elliott.
Yeah, I spoke to him.
How came this about? And when will we see the result? Of course, we want to.
We all want to know. We all want to know.
Bobby has a book out, which, and I spoke to him 2 weeks ago, and we still talk. I mean, we're talking after 50 odd years, in nearly 60 years, we're still talking. And Bobby turns out to be 80 next year. And of course, I'm just a kid. I'm not even 77 yet. Anyway, so we got together a lot, and every now and again, Bobby would stay at my place, my parents' place, and we talked about. He's got a book out, which called "It Ain't Heavy, It's My Story," or I think that's what it's called. And I wanted to write a review of it, so Bobby sent me one, and I learned things about Bobby that I thought, I mean, I didn't go, I was not forced to go down the coal mines, but Bobby did go down the coal mines, and I never knew that about him. And had my parents not come to London, I would have gone down the coal mines. That's what happens. The family came from a coal mining town, and so I'd have been there, a few thousand feet underground getting coal out. So anyway, Bobby and I are still in touch, and God knows how many years ago we decided, let's make nobody's made a drum record for years, let's have a go. So we went into the studio. We did, one side was called Drum and Coke, and that was a play on words on rum and Coke, not anything else, as in Coca-Cola. I mean, we wouldn't have had any idea. This was very early on. And so the A side was Drum and Coke, where, God, I was nearly going to sing it then. Anyway, I think Russell played on it.
Go ahead.
And I think he did down it. Anyway, the B side was Why Won't They Let Us Drummers Sing? And so it was a comedy record, Why won't they let us drummers sing? It seems to me it really is a waste. Why won't they let us drummers sing? Seems to me they've really got no taste. It seems a shame that we're all really stuck right at the back, singing stories to ourselves with voices that they lack. If they could only listen, they would say, we're all right, Jack. Oh, why won't they let us drummers sing? And it had a comedy trumpet player, and it's bizarre. And guess what? It didn't come out. Hard to believe, but
we want to hear it. We want to hear it. We want to hear it. Everybody's listening to this saying, "Where is that? We want to hear it."
Well, the only person who's got it is Bobby. And next time I talk to him, I have no idea where my copy went. I mean, it got as far as acetates, and then it didn't get any further. We didn't have the same A&R man, if you see what I mean. And we had John Burgess, and the Hollies had Ron Richards. So anyway, it didn't come out, which is a great shame. And it'd be interesting to hear it.
It would be. I mean, anyway, to try and find it, we'd look through.
You're not going to find it.
We'd look through any window, wouldn't we, really?
Oh, yeah. Yes, we probably would. I try not to, yeah. These are the puns. So anyway, we did make the record, and we had a lot of fun doing it, and we moved on. And then Bobby, I've read Bobby's book. They were so bloody busy. It's ridiculous. I thought we were busy, but I mean, I think it looks like the Hollies were busier because they put, each day there's another gig. Well, I never did all that. I just said, well, as you probably know, and then we went, and I would just say where we were going and what we did. So it's that stream of consciousness thing. So Bobby's book is out, and it's a jolly good read. And I mean, he's had a checkered career, and things in the book that I didn't know about. But of course, everyone has things that people don't know about.
Well, there's another book that maybe all our listeners should definitely make some time to read. So thank you for that.
Bobby,
that's good.
Very well written, and he's captured the time rather well. And
that's really good. Well, we were going to before we move on from Adam Faith and to take a slight sort of almost a serious slant, we heard from Russ. And it'll be probably under the Argent conversation that we have in a minute, but we heard from Russ in the last podcast. We heard his version of events when you, or maybe others as well, saved his life. And what I'm keen to ask you about, because something that I discovered recently, thanks to you, is that Adam Faith maybe saved not only Russ's life, but some of the other guys as well. So I think this would be a lovely time to ask you about that story and to hear what really happened.
Okay, funnily enough, we were playing at Weston-super-Mare it's a theatre down by the sea. Well, mind you, aren't they all down by the sea? What am I saying? It's the seaside, that's what they do. Anyway, we were playing, and it had a semicircular stage, and the curtains went round, and they were very flimsy curtains, I remember. And all of a sudden, and then I was counting in whatever the first Roulettes song was going to be. We always went on before Adam did. So we would warm up the audience, and then Adam would come on. He was standing at the side of the stage at that time. So Thorpe and Mod walked forward, and Russell walked forward, and I counted the song in. But before I counted the song, everybody except Russell, for some reason, touched the microphones and their guitar at the same time, which is a real no-no. And the next thing I saw, and there was nobody behind me, was the Thorpe and Mod going up in the air, literally like that, like rockets, and then coming down in an arc and simply sprawling on the floor. So Tell, who was standing on the side, knew exactly what to do, and he came over and kicked the soles of their feet. And evident that he and Thorpe had gone to karate lessons, and it's one of the things it seems that they teach you in karate. So Tell knew about bashing or kicking the soles of the feet, and he managed to resuscitate them. So that was one. The other one was we were playing in Germany. We were at the Zoom Club in Frankfurt, and we started the show. I counted in my days are numbered, I think, something like that. And all of a sudden, Russell was back in the drums with me. And I remember thinking,
this is Argent, is it, Bob? As opposed to,
sorry,
yeah.
I haven't set it up. Yeah,
No, that's fine. That's fine. I'm just clarifying for the listeners. Obviously, I'm not aware of the story, but I just wanted to clarify. We'd love to hear.
Yeah. So all of a sudden, Russell's back with me. And I'm thinking, what's going on? And there was a part of the Argent show where we would all be very close together and playing. You know, it was Rock and Roll Man. And so I thought, Russell's freaking out already. It's a bit early. It's the first song. And then I looked at him, and he had, you could see electricity going all around his body, around his head, round the guitar, and even round the guitar tuners. There was this blue, sort of a blue flame, and it went all the way under the guitar and down to the floor. So he had done the what you're not supposed to do. He touched the microphone and his guitar at the same time, created a circuit, and that was that. So he fell on me, and I had rubber boots on, which they were from Miss Selfridge, if anybody's really interested. They were girls' boots. It's a fair cop. But I looked the business. Anyway, believe it or not, they saved Russell's life, because even though I instinctively put my hands on him, so therefore I cut off half of or rather, we split the voltage that was going through him. And so it was going across both of us, both of our hearts, and I was able to move my feet. I don't think Russell could move anything. So I kicked the microphone stand and managed to bend the microphone stand enough for the lead that went up to the microphone to break and come out, whereupon the circuit was uncompleted, or whatever the word is, was broken. That's the word. And so the next thing we know, the club is closed down. Russell is off to hospital in a white. Do you have white ambulances in? Are they white in Germany? Anyway, so
yes, they are. Yes, they are. White with the red cross on the sides.
Right. So anyway, they dragged him off. He tells the story that they charged him. I don't know if they charged him on the way in or on the way out, but they actually. This is Germany. Of course, now it was long before E111s, and of course we don't have E11s anymore, do we, Streety?
Somebody has to pay the bill. Better get your money.
Yeah, but they did. I think. Well, what Russell said is he paid the bill, and then the people came to the Zoom Club, and the Zoom Club paid the bill. So it was...
Russ tells the story of as he's being carried off the stage. He remembers hearing, I think he said a GI or something. Hey, you coming back on? Hey, you coming back on?
There were lots of GIs. We specialized in GIs. And did he tell you the story of a GI wanted to sing a specific song, and we let him. He was really nagging. And there's this guy, we assumed if he wants to sing, he knows what he's doing. And we said, what are you going to sing? And there's a sort of a joke amongst musicians. There's a song called Wendy Night. And so if you're going to play this song, you always say, well, Wendy Night. Well, it's actually Wendy Night has come and the land is dark. So this guy came up and said, Russell said, so what key? And he said, oh, it doesn't matter. And Russell said, of course it matters. He said, no, I'll just sing it. So do the same as the record. Well, the record's in a high key. So we started, dong, dong, ba-da-dum, bum, ba-da-dum. And he came, Wendy Night! And we couldn't think how we could stop this train. The train was gathering speed and we couldn't stop it. And there is another story, but I can't give you that. But I will next when I see you. This one's not fair, but it is hilarious, and it creates. It's all about a guy who split his pants. I'll say no more than that. Well, if that means anything to you.
It does. It does. I mean, to think that Adam Faith. I mean, I don't know whether that's in his book, but I have read it. But I'm going to have another look whether that's in his book about saving the 2 or 3 of his musicians' lives on stage, but it just shows you, apart from being a great actor, a great singer, and a great guy, he was also an extremely bright spark as well.
Well, there is a sort of a corollary to that. Because of what happened, there was a company in Newcastle which made circuit breakers, and nobody had thought about using a circuit breaker for a guitar before. Right. So we invested in one for each of the guys, and so therefore we had, we felt that we were safe. And years after the event, we had them tested, and they didn't work.
No.
Well, we haven't talked about Unit 4, but do you want to talk about Unit 4?
You've read my mind, Mr. Henrit, because what I was going to say was we're sort of creeping into Argent territory, which in particular I'm looking forward to. However, why don't we cover on the way? We ought to cover Unit 4 plus 2, concrete and clay, and stuff like that. So yeah, we'd love to hear, please.
Okay, well, I went to school with a bunch of folk singers, and Unit 4 plus 2, or Unit 4 as they were a bunch of folk singers, and they were a vocal group. They weren't, rock and roll was the least of their worries. They weren't thinking about that. And so they made a record which was rather good, but it was very much a vocal group sort of song. And it wasn't a rock and roll vocal group. It wasn't doo-wop, it wasn't any of that. And it was decided that they were going to have another bash at making a record. And they asked me and Russell to come along and play on it. And so we turned up at Nova Studios, which were, I guess they were Marble Arch. And we turned up and did Concrete and Clay. And the guy who wrote it, who was Brian Parker, who'd been in the Roulettes for 2 weeks and couldn't stand the stress of being talked about every night. Sorry, Brian, but he couldn't. And he eventually put together a band and wrote Concrete and Clay. So while we're in the studio, he wanted it to be like the Drifters, as in you to me. Which it would have worked, but it wasn't rock and roll. So me and Russell grabbed it by the scruff of the neck and played it like a rock and roll song. And I played something I'd never played in my life before, which was on it, and it was a bossa nova. And it was a very fast song, so it was pretty much too fast for a bossa nova. But I knew how to play a bossa nova, and it sounded rather good. And the next thing we know, it sold 2 million.
You to me are sweet as roses in the morning, and you to me are soft as summer rain at dawn. In love we share that's something rare. The sidewalks in the street, the concrete and the clay beneath my feet begins to crumble, but love will never die, because we'll see the mountains tumble before we say goodbye. My love and I will be in love eternally. That's the way it's meant to be. All around I see the purple shades of evening, and on the ground shadows fall, and once again you're in my arms so tenderly. The sidewalks in the street, the concrete and the clay beneath my feet begins to crumble, but love will never die, because we'll see the mountains tumble before we say goodbye. My love and I will be in love eternally, and that's the way it's meant to be. Sidewalks in the street, the concrete and the clay beneath my feet begins to crumble, but love will never die, because we'll see the mountains tumble before we say goodbye. My love and I will be in love eternally. That's the way, that's the way it's meant to be. That's the way, it's meant to be. Oh, that's the way it's meant to be.
We got £5.15 shillings and sixpence each, which was, but that said, that was the way it was. If you were doing sessions, that's what you did. And I think if somebody had said to me, would you like to get paid for this, or how would you like a piece of the action? We'd have said, oh no, we'll just take the money. I know we would. We wouldn't, because nobody knew whether anything was going to be a hit record, especially not selling 2 million. And so we were Unit 4, or by this time we were the +2, and we went on, and eventually, having been to France for several months to play with a guy called Richard Anthony, we came back and joined Unit 4 while we were waiting for Argent to get itself together. And that's about it, really. So Argent came along, and me and Russell were playing with Unit 4, so the whole thing does dovetail. We looked out into the audience, and there were Chris White and Rod Argent. We were somewhere in darkest Essex, probably Basildon. It was Basildon, I think. And we looked out, and there they were. We thought, I wonder why they're here. So at the end, they came up and they said, we're getting a band together, and we'd like you two to be in it. So we said, oh, great, thanks. They said, why don't you come and listen to the songs? So we went to listen to the songs at Chris's flat in Woodside Park, and were entranced. These songs were fabulous. And of course, why wouldn't they be? Rod and Chris have been writing great songs forever. So the next thing we know, we're in Argent, and the whole express train is about to get going. And we then went to Germany to get it together before we went to America. And we did the typical 9 45-minute spots a night, which I always say is a bit like working down the mines, only harder. And so we loved it. And I spoke to Cozy Powell about it, because a lot of us bands in the 60s went to Germany to get it together. And you had to play 9 45-minute spots and more. Sometimes you had to play until everybody had gone. And of course, we didn't know what German clubs were for. We assumed it was something to do with music. And then the penny dropped, and we saw all these women along the bar, women of negotiable affection, as they call them in America. And so we knew exactly what was going on. So, which was good. We had somebody to play to then, we could emote. So that was the very beginning of Argent. And the next thing we know, we're on our way to America to tour. And that particular train, the Argent train, didn't stop until 1975, maybe 75, and by then Russell had left, so there was a change of direction. And from there, I started playing with anybody. Well, I say anybody, that's stupid, but I was a gun for hire. So I played with Don Mclean. I played with lots and lots of people.
Well, we've got lots to come to talk to you about on that, haven't we, Sven?
Okay.
Yeah, but I know. Let's jump back just a little bit to the Argent time. You sold more than 2 million records. So don't care too much about Unit 4+2. There's one Argent album. Well, I can say, it's Ian and my favorite one. And I think Ian loves the album more than I do. It's the In Deep album.
Oh, right.
Argent's In Deep. And there are so many stories about the Argent In Deep album. And I think it was, artwork-wise, a blueprint for a band in the 90s. So, Ian, do you want to ask the question you always wanted to ask around the In Deep album?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I could speak for ages about the In Deep album. I could speak for ages about Argent, because that's my first experience of seeing Mr. Henrit on stage at Croydon Fairfield Hall in 1972. But anyway,
Wow.
in Deep, as Sven says, is our favourite album, and for me, It's Only Money parts 1 and 2 is just for me. It's better than God Gave Rock and Roll to You. It's better. It just when you started with that, when you did the reunion tour, the Goose Pimples had Goose Pimples. But anyway, don't get me started.
It's only money.
I've actually got goosebumps as I'm talking to you.
I'll give you 8 minutes.
Let's be sensible about it. Not many people realise, and I didn't know, I have to say, until recent years, that the album cover for In Deep was a Hypnosis album cover, which is Storm Thurgeson and Aubrey Powell. For those that perhaps listening to this don't know, this famous company, and unfortunately Storm's no longer with us.
He's gone,
but are probably, not probably, for me, the company responsible for probably the most famous covers in rock and roll, from Led Zeppelin to Pink Floyd's Dark Side.
Pink Floyd, yeah.
It's just, the list goes on and on. It's just phenomenal. So let's talk about the cover that they did for which was very off the wall for them to do one Argent cover in the first instance, but also the cover photo was taken at an Olympic-sized swimming pool, I think. And apparently all 4 members jumped in for the shoot, but one couldn't swim. And I thought to myself, if that is true, I know someone who could tell the story better than anybody. And that's you, Mr.
Oh, right. Yeah, it was, we all dived in. Actually, Rod wasn't a swimmer and Russell wasn't a swimmer. I don't think. I'm pretty sure he wasn't. But so me and Jim, swimming pools are longer than they're wide. So Jim and I dived in, did a width, and the camera was underneath one side of the pool. There was a window. It was a sort of place where you would see. They would show what the stroke was and all that sort of thing, and it was another option for television. Anyway, so we dived in, got out, ran round, did it again, got out, ran round. So now in those days, we weren't talking digital here. We were talking proper film, of which there were 36 on a roll, I think. So me and little Jimmy did 36 widths underwater. Now, of an Olympic swimming pool, this was hell. This was. We were knackered, absolutely zammed by the time we got out, Hypnosis were jolly nice chaps. But I liked the Pink Floyd one where there are 2 pictures ostensibly the same, but they're not. You know, that one where one's got a Fender in it and the other one's got a Gibson in it, but they're in the same position in the picture. So they didn't do it just to In Deep for us. They offered us an album cover, which they said was for us, bless them, and it was an eye shut, and on the eye was an eyeball painted, and so we said, well, it's not really us, we don't think, guys. And they said, okay, no problem. And the next thing, Peter Gabriel had it. So there's a Peter Gabriel album cover where there is an eye painted onto the not onto the eyeball, but onto the eyelid. That's the word. And so we decided against that one. And I mean, that was another thing about being in a band, is that you had to work out what album cover you were going to have, you know, and you'd have to agonize about this. And of course, all the good ones had been given to Pink Floyd.
Well, the companies sell them. I mean, there's websites where you can buy, you know, prints, high quality prints signed by, you know, Storm, etc. I've got a Dark Side one, but I met the guy that's taken over from Storm and actually said, have you got anything relating back to In Deep? Have you got any of the originals? And he had a look around and he couldn't find anything. So that's a real shame, but there we are. But that's a great story. Just another quick Argent, and some of these I've got from you. We hear on the grapevine that the multi-talented Paul Carrick Squeeze and Mike and the Mechanics fame, Ace as well. You know, how long has this been going on? was asked to replace Russ in Argent when he left, but then actually maybe the request was withdrawn when everybody realised he was in fact a keyboard player and not a guitarist.
That's exactly it. And I mean, we thought his voice was brilliant, and it was, and still is. Well, of course it is. And so we were casting around. It's very interesting who did sort of audition for Argent and didn't get the gig, but certainly Paul. We were astonished to find out that he was a keyboard player. I don't know why we didn't think he was a keyboard player. It just seemed like he sounded like a guitarist and a singer, you know, the way he sort of sang. But of course he wasn't, so we didn't. He didn't get the gig.
Yeah.
But lots of other people didn't get the gig either. I'm not even sure I'm supposed to tell you. But yeah, that's a bit unfair. But certainly it was the beginning of Argent Mark II, and we were off and running again. And then we did Circus. We did Circus, and Circus was
fantastic album. That is absolutely unbelievable. That album.
It is, yeah.
That first track with John Grimaldi, I always remember when you used to come on stage, and it used to start with the light would go on Jim with the and then keep Rod's keyboard, and then John Grimaldi hit the note. It just went mental from there onwards with you coming in on the drums, and it's just absolutely mad. Fantastic.
So let's talk a little bit more about the Argent Mark II and what became Phoenix later on. In a few minutes, just a short break with some music from that era, and we'll be back with the one and only Bob Henrit in just a few minutes.
The suckers, each must play a part. The clown, the jester, mirror the meaning of their art. In the suckers, you can be fool or maybe king. The sound of laughter the wedding of the ring, but all found
Welcome everybody to the Voices of Russ Ballard podcast with Bob Henrit. Or shall I say, welcome to the circus of the Voices of Russ Ballard podcast. Well, yeah, we were just talking about Argent, and Argent is so important to all of us. And Bob, you told us a little bit about your time in Argent. We've spoken about the In Deep album and the artwork, which might be the blueprint for Nirvana's Nevermind. But yeah, that is a different story. And we were just talking about the Circus album. So when Russell left Argent, tell us a little bit about the last years of Argent.
Yeah, we regrouped, as you know, and John Grimaldi arrived and John Verity arrived, and we just got on with it, really. I suppose that was what happened in those days. There was never any thought that we would do anything else. We would just keep on doing the gigs and find our way to America as many times as we could and find our way to Europe as many times as we could. But I think at the beginning of it, there was a thought that we might do the circus gigs around the country, but obviously I think we discovered that that was going to be expensive, it was going to be complicated, and did everybody want to see us in a circus? But the one-off, which was at the Roundhouse, was great fun, and
I was there. I was there. Yeah, absolutely fabulous. Yeah,
I was there too.
Really?
You could probably remember it better than me.
If somebody could just, because that was shot properly, and JV told us that, as far as he was concerned, even for those days, it was filmed properly. And therefore, somebody around there, and I know Good Earth took over the management, because I remember getting badges through the post. So some of the listeners might identify with that God Gave Rock and Roll to You badge or whatever. And so I got 3 friends. Very naughty thing I did, actually, Bob. I said to friends at school, there was 2 or 3 mates. I said, "Can you join this Argent fan club?" Who are Argent? I said, "Don't worry, just join it, and you got a different free gift." You seem to be. So they gave me all their free gifts, so I had them all. But anyway, a bit naughty, really. But
thank you.
Anyway, but if anybody's knows access to where that film is, or we could ever see it, I think it would just be phenomenal, wouldn't it?
I thought JV knew where it was, or I seem to remember being shown a clip of it or something of that nature.
Hold your head up. You can see on YouTube. So it's got the guy is jumping around, and it's got JVC in the lead, obviously. But that's the only clip that I'm aware is around.
Yeah, it's interesting, really, because we never thought about. I don't think we ever thought about longevity, but I do know that Pink Floyd do think about longevity, and certainly Nick Mason has got an assistant whose job is to catalogue everything that happened. She's a very nice lady, and she knows what she's doing, because she's I was going to say she's a cataloger, but she's an archivist. Is that the word, archivist?
Yes.
And that's what she does, and which saves it all getting lost, of course, because the further you get away from it, you start looking at things through rose-tinted spectacles, and of course it's being in a band is yin and yang. Some of it is good and some of it's bad, but all of it is being in a band, and we would be finding our way around the world. There was a particular story where we were going to America, and John Verity, we were all sitting on the plane, and John Verity decided he was going to get some sleep on the way. So he took some sleeping pills and sat there until they took over. And eventually, it turns out there's something wrong with the plane. So JV is asleep, not only is he asleep, he's spark out. And the plane had a problem, so we all had to get off it while they mended it. And John V had to be carried off on a stretcher. And he woke up in the departure lounge where they took us and said, "Blimey, that was quick." He thought he was in New York. So beware of taking sleeping pills. Well, you have to wait until the plane's taken off. Don't try to preempt it.
So Bob, going back before we leave Argent, just some quick questions for you. When I first saw Argent, in some of, particularly when you did like some of the polytechnics, etc., which my father took me around to, a big part of the show was the Fakir. That's if I pronounced it correctly, which was your showcase. And if anybody hasn't seen the clips on YouTube of this super athletic drummer with the biggest drum kit you've ever seen, absolutely knocking it out. Yeah, just unbelievable. So tell us a little bit about the Fakir and how it came about. It's a very unusual thing because you never recorded it either. So it's pretty unusual.
Live album.
It's on
a live album.
Is it? It's not on Encore, is it? It's not on Encore.
I always thought it was.
No.
I'll be corrected, but or stand corrected. But
there's a long percussion. There's a long percussion piece on "I Am the Dance of Ages" where it features you on the gong and other things.
Oh yes,
and Rod on the keyboards. But the Fakir isn't. I would just double.
Well, it was a very interesting song because, believe it or not, it's not in 4/4. Cool. Why would it be in 4/4? God, we were progressive, man. So it wasn't in 4/4, and it was quarter tone. Now, quarter tone is where is in between the cracks on a keyboard. That's quarter tone, and so it goes. So it sounds atonal, and that's what we wanted it to sound like. And there's a story about the Fakir, about why we did it. And we did it because Jim, bless him, had a weak bladder. So halfway through the act, he simply needed to leave the stage to relieve himself. And which was fine in Argent because I could do a drum solo, but it never worked in the Kinks. Nobody was going to wait while he went off for a wee in the Kinks. As a matter of fact, they would keep him there. Poor old Jim. So he had a weak bladder, and bless him. And that was where the Fakir came from. But I think it was somebody else had recorded it, Don Ellis perhaps in America, and so we did it for years and years and years, simply so Jim could have a wee. Can I say wee?
You can indeed. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's on the there is I've just looked it up, by the way. The fact it is one of the live sort of BBC stroke albums. It's actually not on Encore, but it is. Yeah, it's 13 minutes 47 seconds long. I've just double checked it, so everybody thinking. So yeah,
well, it was great fun to play, and of course that was at a time, guys, when everybody did a drum solo. It was obligatory. And you didn't have to be any good. You really, everybody did it. So, here comes the drum solo. Let's get to the bar, or let's go to the loo, or whatever it is. So that came around at the same time as the quadraphonic PA. Now we had a quadraphonic PA made by, can't remember who it was, but they were just down the road from us lot, and so we could send the sound around 4 speakers. Back, front, side, and that's what we did. And of course, I've never heard it. I have no idea what it sounded like. I was on the stage. I could just hear what was behind me. Couldn't hear anything else.
Amazing. So it was amazing. I can tell you, absolutely amazing.
Was it? Okay. Well, I think we paid 35,000 quid for it.
It's so far ahead of its time. When you think of 5.1 and movies and things that were to come in the future, you think you were doing that in the 70s, when Russ was in the band as well, and doing a quadraphonic version of In Deep, actually, which there are some vinyl copies around, and there was a SACD released recently, which I've got a couple of copies of, just in case one gets worn out, and it sounds fantastic. It sounds
RSD were the company that made it, and here I'm not sure I should tell you this, but it was discovered if you put speakers front, back, left and right, and the same at the back, and put them out of phase, you would get the quadraphonic sound happening, or rather the quadraphonic sort of distance happening, by putting them out of phase. So you didn't need to buy what Sony was selling. Sony had a special little box that was all very clever, but you didn't need it.
Wow.
Oh my God.
So I told you that.
Was it also true that one Argent gig in the US, there was a bomb scare halfway through?
Oh yeah.
And when you came back, well, I'll let you tell the story.
Okay. Well, we were playing at the famous Fillmore East in New York, first tour with the Moody Blues, and we just arrived there, and we were starting out. We did 51 planes in 50 days, which is too many, and the 51st plane brought us home. But anyway, we were playing in New York, and halfway through our act, there was a bomb scare. So all sorts of sirens and things went off, and we all found our way out of the theatre, standing in the street with the punters. And we're all having a nice time, we're all chatting and everything. And eventually they checked the theatre and there were no bombs. So we went back. Now 3,000 people had left the theatre, but 5,000 people came back. Now the interesting thing about that is that this was actually before there were any mobile phones. And funnily enough, I was writing about it recently, and the penny dropped that this might happen quite a bit at Fillmore East, because where do you get 2,000 people from so quickly? You know, people who actually want to go. So I figured that it was a scam that was going on, where it happened every month or so, and there'd be a bomb scare and everybody would go out, and 2,000 people more would come back, and it was the way to get to the theatre.
Good God. But I think the last question on Argent, unless Sven's, and forgive me, I've monopolised the Argent questions, but Sven knows how dear it is to me. Steve, I remember Steve Rodford of the Zombies telling me some time ago that he grew up seeing you with his dad on stage. Literally grew up. I mean, you know, you think about the All Together Now album cover with a very young Steve Rodford on there. And I remember seeing him helping out, setting up your drums, if I'm not mistaken, at the Argent reunion gig at the High Voltage Festival.
Oh yes.
Which I thought was fabulous and really sort of, you know, it brought the full circle together. Did you ever give him coaching when he was young? Did you, you know, was he interested in what you were doing?
Well, he would just be at the gigs or at the rehearsals and seeing what was going on. So it was more subliminal than that. It wasn't, this is how a paradiddle goes and this is where you play it. It wasn't that at all. So he says that he got it from me, so that I'm very pleased for that. And but it certainly wasn't. I didn't give any lessons to him. As a matter of fact, I've not really given lessons to anybody, including Josh, my son, who is a much better drummer than me. He's proper schooled, you know, and he's grade 6 drums and everything. And so he didn't get any lessons either. But what we did instead, we left all the gear around. So there were guitars, there were basses, there were keyboards, there were drums, all just sort of everywhere in the house. And nobody was persuaded, or nobody was sort of coerced into learning an instrument, although everybody went to piano lessons. But then after that, they were on their own. And James, the eldest son, plays classical guitar, and Lucy plays piano, and
Wow.
and Josh was never burdened with musical talent, so he became a drummer.
And the gags continue.
Really,
the gags
really
continue.
good drummer, but he's left-handed, so there's always that problem. We did something when the pandemic hit. We set up two drum kits in the garden, and we played. We started off with the Hold Your Head Up rhythm, so we're both thumping away at that, and then I would shout to him that there are certain mnemonics in drumming. One is the black cat whittles in the white cat's eye. And so I said, black cat whittles, and he went rump bump baba dee dee bump bump bump, and then we both came in to play that. And then I would say flats in Dagenham, and he'd go flats in Dagenham, flats in, and then we bring it back to Hold Your Head Up. And then we had various other mnemonics that we use, shagaboom, boom shagger. And so I would just shout these things out, and we'd revert back to, and all of this, of course, we were separated by the amount of room that we needed to, obviously, because the pandemic had just begun. And we'd like to do it again, but we just haven't got around to doing it. Perhaps when it gets a little bit warmer, we'll have another bash at it. But it was a good thing to do, and this comes from, if I haven't done any teaching of little kids of late, but then nobody has, and it's an introduction to drums, and it has one drum kit in the equation, but everybody else plays on the sort of tables that you get in art class, if you remember them. They're all covered in paint, but we play on tables, so all of the rhythms are happening on the table rather than on the drum kit, and we march up and down, and everybody has a jolly good time, and we talk in terms of the most famous drum beat, and they all eventually realize that it is "We Will Rock You," and then we'll go from there and march up and down and chant and do all that sort of thing. And the black cat whittles in the white cat's eye.
Fantastic. Well, that's, I think, moving on from Argent. Otherwise, I'll probably still keep going for the next 2 hours. I'm going to hand over to Sven. We've got lots of stuff to continue with, and lots of subject matter to think about. The Phoenix, Genesis, Leo Sayer, Russ Ballard, Ringo Starr,
right.
Richard Daltrey, and all sorts. So, Sven, lots of questions. I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Ian. Before we start with Phoenix and other recording sessions, Bob, some point in the 70s, you gave an interview. Well, you gave tons of interviews, but in that particular interview, you said, you teased something on it, and you said you wanted to release a maxi single, a song you wrote together with Russell, kind of a funky thing. Do you remember this? And what happened to that idea? Because you and Russ together as songwriters, you were pretty good, because you wrote one of my favorite Adam Faith songs. Everybody's talking about it. Think or Love.
When the war began and man first met up with woman, let me tell you the first thing they talked about. They couldn't talk of love or the stars above, not until they got the language sorted out. Everybody's talking about a thing called love, baby. Everybody's talking about a thing called love. Everybody's talking about a thing called love. Talk about it. Everybody's talking about it. I know that time and tide are set to wait for no man, and I agree, of course, that this is true. But the same busy pair will wait for a woman, especially when she's talking about the things of love to you. Everybody's talking about a thing called love. Everybody's, let me hear it singing now. Say, everybody's talking about a thing called love. Talk about it. Everybody's talking about it. Every day my friend talks about the girl next door. Dear old Casanova, he had women by the score. Most of the films we see, people seem to fall in love. And most of the songs we hear about the moon and stars above. Everybody's talking about a thing called love. Everybody's talking about a thing, that's what I want to hear. Everybody's talking about a thing called love. Talk about it. Everybody's talking about it. Everybody's talking about a thing called love. Everybody's talking about a thing called. Let me hear it one more. Everybody's talking about a thing called love. Talk about it. Everybody's talking about it.
Yeah.
You, the songwriters, and what happened to the funky thing you wanted to release? Bob Henrit single from mid of the 70s.
Well, I have no idea, Sven. There are, you probably don't know this, but underneath Haverstock Hill tube station is where everybody's masters are stored. And it's underneath the tube station. It's a relic of the war, and that's where they were going to keep troops just in case anything happened. So it's a huge warren of rooms where they had bunks for soldiers and all that sort of thing. But they also stored everybody's masters. So underneath Haverstock Hill tube station are everybody's masters, and including Argents, including the Beatles, including everybody really. And wow. It's air conditioned, it's everything that it needs to be. But what it isn't, everything is stored on tape. And tape, recording tape is an emulsion on top of a plastic tape, which falls off. So, and everybody thinks that their stuff is being taken care of, but it actually isn't, because if you were to play it, the emulsion would fall off. So you have to bake it, then you have to play it once and go for and save it to another format, whichever one you fancy that you think is going to be around longest, because everybody thought recording tape was going to be around forever, and then it wasn't. So that's where it's all stored. So underneath there must be treasure trove from Argent and everybody else. But I wish I could tell you I had any idea about it. We used to go to, we had a friend who had a studio called Livingston, which was just down the road from me. And I went to school with this chap whose name was Nick Kinsey. And I also went to school with his sister, which was good. And we would turn up at Nick's to do demos. So a lot of Russell's songs were first of all demoed at Nick Kinsey's studio, which was called Livingston, and it was in Wood Green. First of all, it was in Barnet, and then it moved to Wood Green. So lots and lots of stuff was put down there. And I spoke to Cozy Powell, and he said, I love Russell's demos. He said, because what you've played, I don't actually really have to work too hard to think what to do. So I was very, very pleased. And Cozy and I got on very, very, very well. And Cozy, of course, had gone through the whole 9 45-minute spots a night thing in Germany, as indeed had David Essex. And David Essex was a drummer, and as had David, as had an awful lot of others. And it was getting the band together in Germany. And it meant that if you could play 9 45-minute spots, you were very capable of doing a 12-hour session with the Kinks, if you see what I mean. And a lot of sessions did run for 12 hours, and we survived. And so Cozy and I had a lot of conversations about that. Bless him. So yeah, I don't know where it is, and I must. What did you say it was called? Oh, you didn't know.
In the interview, you haven't said any name of the track. It was just, I think it was an interview you did in 1975.
Oh, right. So the end of Argent.
Yeah, at the end of Argent, and yeah, that's where you said, okay, I've wrote a song together with Russ. But maybe we will discover this one day. But at the end of Argent, it was the birth of Phoenix.
Yes.
Another brilliant group. And a brilliant group recording Russ Ballard songs.
I like to think we were the first power trio, because being in a power trio is it's like being liberated. You know, you bless Rod, but you know we were just going for it, and it was all to do with empathy. And I would catch Jim's eye, and we would know where we were going, and we'd look at Johnny V, and we'd know what we were doing, and it was a great time. And we had a management. Well, we went to America to make an album, which was, and so we were playing in studios where we hadn't expected to ever be anywhere near. Of course, we knew all about. We played at EMI a lot from 1962 onwards, and various other studios, but we hadn't actually recorded anything in America except for Argent did something for Coca-Cola. And we recorded it in New York, and I'm guessing it came out. It was obviously it was meant to come out, and but whether or not, how successfully, I think it was Hold Your Head Up with Coca-Cola connotations, perhaps. Coke. I'm just trying to think how you could fit Coca-Cola in. I'm sure there is a way. I'm sure we would have thought of it.
Hold your can up. Hold your can up.
Who knows?
So that's a bit like Lola, really, isn't it? So we put Phoenix together. We had a bit of fun, and we played in, oh gosh, we were in Sheffield, and we were just doing some gigs with Phoenix, the very, very first gigs. And of course, people came to see us to listen to Argent songs, but we didn't want to do Argent songs. We wanted to do Phoenix songs. So from the back of the audience in this particular gig in Sheffield, which I think was the Black Swan, came a voice, "Play Something We Know." And people we realized that you have to be very careful what you give them. And you have to give as the Kinks would say, give the people what they want. And we weren't, but it was a really good band, and we were pushing the envelope as far as it could possibly go. More, I mean, Argent, of course, was very progressive, but Phoenix was much more rocky, and we were. Yeah.
It wasn't that first album was really legendary and really well. And I think when JV was on the show, he recounts that time, Bob, as really as you being extremely unlucky, because you were the band was competing with punk, and you were probably the least fashionable band at the time, so the timing was all wrong. On another occasion it could have gone the other way.
Well, we were progressive, and everybody talks about prog rock. I don't ever remember anybody saying it. That's up there with if you can remember the 60s, you weren't there, that sort of thing. Well, it's not true. It's just something that a writer, to describe what was going on, has sort of used. And but prog rock we were just seeing how far we could push one another, and certainly Hold Your Head Up was that sort of thing. And me and Russell were walking along the beach in Saint-Tropez. We went back to Saint-Tropez because we'd been there we'd spent a lot of time there with Richard Anthony, and we were thinking about what we could do, what sort of songs we could do, and we worked out that we could do a version of, Yes, we're doing America, if you remember. They came on and did America. Da, 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 da. And we did, it was from Hair. One of the songs from Hair. Yeah. And it never stopped all the way through. If it could have a 9/4 bar, and it did. And if it could have a 3/4 bar, and it did. And we went from there. Oh God, how come I can't remember it, Russell? Normally I would ask Jim these things, and Jim was a very good. Jim never ever agreed with me. I mean, we did the Roulettes first gig, and I came home and I was sitting at the table, sort of getting over the emotion of it all, and I thought, I got a calculator out to see if I could work out how many gigs I'd done in my life. And I stopped at 20,000. And I thought, well, that would be a good place to stop, which is an awful lot of gigs. So later, not that night, but later on, I phoned Jim and I said, Jim, I was just working out we did 20,000 gigs. He said, no, we didn't. And that was the end of the conversation. So, I mean, Jim would always correct me. And that's why it's very difficult for a whole band to write a book, because you're never going to get them to agree about the small facts about a story. because everybody sees it in a slightly different way, very slightly, but often an important way. So Jim was my sounding board, and unfortunately he's gone. So and now Thorpe's gone as well. It's rather complicated, and Ian Gibbons is no. So these guys are not available for me to talk to anymore, which is awful. I mean, we were, as you know, the Roulettes were very close, and Argent were very close, and that's how it gets in a band. And if you don't get very close, then you're probably in the wrong band.
Mm.
Just on that track you recorded, it wasn't Aquarius, was it? Didn't
It
Argent,
was Aquarius, yeah. When the moon is in the second half, yeah.
Argent recorded it, and because I remember being at an Argent gig when someone was asking you to play it, and I was desperately trying to find the recording of it, but it wasn't commercially available. I couldn't find it anyway.
It was very, very complicated, but it was great to play, and we loved it. There's another story that I don't know if Russell told you. We used to come onto Ravel's Bolero. Yeah. That was our intro music, which was quite long. So the intro music would start, dung, diddle, dung, diddly, dung, diddly, diddly, diddly. And eventually we would get to the end, and it would be time for us to go on, and I would whack the gong, and we would go into whatever the first song was going to be. And I was... I'm not sure how I got into this, but we would always run out of time. Right, there'll be something wrong, mostly with Rod's keyboards, and so we get to the 15 minutes of Ravel's Bolero, and the music would stop, and we weren't ready. Not ready. So these are the things that happen to rock and roll bands. They happen to us a lot. There's another story about Russell. We were playing in Ohio, and nobody had really scoped out the stage. And it turned out that we'd done the sound check, but nobody had really been moving around on it. It turned out that the stage had a step on it going towards the front, and I certainly hadn't spotted it, but then I didn't need to. I was sitting down, but Russell hadn't spotted it. So he walked towards the front of the stage going dong, ding, 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 dong, ding, 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 for that particular song, and discovered the lip of the stage and stumbled down it, and his guitar fell off, and it went crang, and nobody knew what to do. There's another story where we were playing in Toronto, and it was our first, I think it was the first gig of an American tour, which, even though we were in Canada, and Rod's organ. We took Rod's organ to America. Now, Rod, it is a Hammond, it's a C3, but it works on different cycles per second. I think America is 50 cycles per second, and Britain is 60, something like that. So Rod's organ wouldn't work, but it did for a few minutes So we started, and we did the first song, and then the organ started playing up, and the tuning went. So the best we could do was do a drum solo. So then the guys fixed it, and we started off again, and lo and behold, it went wrong, and we did a drum solo. So there's the second drum solo of the night. We're in this huge theater, it was Varsity Stadium, so it was a football pitch, and we got going again, and then it was time for the drum solo. So there were 3 drum solos. God knows what the audience felt. One drum solo for some people is more than enough, and not 3. So we were often plagued by those sort of problems.
Yeah, the first concert I ever went to was at Croydon. The slow hand clap started because the organ had blown up or something, and the slow hand clap, and it used to happen quite a lot with Argent. We touched upon punk rock a moment ago. And I know Sven wants to ask you about the Barnet Dogs in a second, which was Russ's answer to punk rock. But before we do that, I don't know whether you can give us a Voices of Russ Ballard exclusive, but you made a little statement about when you were doing some recording sessions post Phoenix, that you made some records with, shall we say, some anonymous punk bands, with because their drummers didn't have the patience to cut it in the studios, which I think is a lovely way of you saying, because you're such a polite gentleman, saying they probably didn't have the ability to do it in the studios, although I'm not putting words in your mouth. But I just wonder if you can name any names, or you're allowed to name any names.
Well, I spoke to Rat Scabies about it, and he told me the whole story about punk, and I never knew. And it turns out that the reason they were called what they were called, like Rat and all those names, is so that they were all on the dole, and they didn't want the people who gave out the money, doled out the money, if you like, to know that they were working. So they had all these Johnny Rotten, all those names were made up so that they wouldn't get picked up, and they could still get their dole. And it turns out, according to, no, it's the truth, that without the dole, punk wouldn't have happened. But to get to the story, the drum store was probably half a dozen buildings on Wardour Street down from the Marquee. And the Marquee studios were at the back of Marquee, and they were doing a lot of recording with punk bands. And every now and again, a harassed producer would rush into drum store, which was right next to the ship. I should have told you that beforehand, and said, "Do you have any drummers here?" And we said, "Well, yeah, we're a drum shop. Look, it's called Henrit's Drum Store." "Oh yeah, right. Can anybody come and do a session?" I said, "We all can. Who is it? What is it?" And I said, "It's a punk session." So we'd follow them as quickly as possible down the road, start the session, and it turns out that it was part of the punk sort of mentality, really. They were difficult, or I think they made themselves difficult, and they just couldn't. They didn't want to keep up. They wanted to get down the pub, and if they didn't get the first take right, they didn't want to do it anymore. "Well, hang on, we played it once. I'm getting down the pub." So they would go down the pub, leaving the producer unaware what to do. So we would come along and play fast and loud and all that stuff for a few minutes, and then we'd walk back to the drum shop. So if you're going to ask the question, who was it? The answer to the question is, I don't know.
Okay.
Most of it was just me and somebody I didn't know with a Mohican haircut and ripped jeans.
Exactly. Well, interesting times. Well, listen, it's the stories continue. It's absolutely fascinating to talk to you, Bob, and we're going to be back on the Voices of Russ Ballard
podcast.
Well, that's the end of our part one, actually, of our conversation with none other than Mr. Bob Henrit. We hope that you all enjoyed it as much as we did and had great fun. I've listened to it 2 or 3 times when we were putting this together, Sven, and I was laughing at. I knew what was coming, but I was still laughing at some of the anecdotes there, weren't you?
Yeah, it's a brilliant conversation with Bob, and Bob has so much to tell. And as we see, we're now over 2 hours. We need to stop here for the moment, but we will come back with the second part of our interview with the one and only Bob Henrit.
Just quickly before we go, anybody listening onto all those multi-platforms. Oh, did I say we're on multi-platforms, Sven? Oh, I think
that sounds good. Yeah, multi-platform. Anybody
that's listening on Apple Music or is listening on any of the other formats, we would love to have a review from you on. Hopefully, it's a good one, but that's up to you. But we'd love to hear more. We'd love to have your feedback, and don't forget to join the Facebook group of the Voices of Russ Ballard if you want to exchange views with like-minded people about this genre of music, and obviously the great Mr. Ballard, and of course Mr. Henrit himself. So until part 2, when we return with Bob talking about the Kinks and lots more, I guess it's goodbye from me, Ian.
And from me, Sven. Thanks for your time. We'll be back soon.
Hi, This is Russ Ballard, and you're listening to the Voices of Russ Ballard podcast.